The royal warrant had her birthmark drawn in black ink, and Avellini knew she had minutes to disappear. She stood frozen beside Brigid's herb table, staring at the crescent-shaped symbol beneath the words Royal Bond Examination. Outside, horses shifted in the village square while armored riders moved from cottage to cottage. The order carried the royal seal. The Alpha King's seal. "They're looking for Omegas," Avellini whispered. Brigid snatched the parchment from her hands, and for the first time in 19 years, Avellini saw genuine terror on the older woman's face. "Listen to me. Do not let them see the mark." Avellini's fingers moved instinctively to the place beneath her collarbone, hidden beneath the neckline of her pale sage dress. She had spent her entire life believing the strange mark was nothing more than a birthmark. Brigid had always insisted she keep it covered, but she'd never explained why. Now royal riders were searching for the same symbol. "Why?" Avellini demanded. "What does it mean?" A fist struck the cottage door. "By order of the crown, all residents are to present themselves for inspection." Brigid's face went white. "Go. Brigid, go, Avellini." Another knock came, harder this time. "Whatever happens, don't let them take you to the capital." That was enough. Avellini slipped through the rear door and ran. She carried no money except 3 silver pieces tucked into her pocket. No cloak. No food. No plan beyond putting as many miles as possible between herself and the men carrying the Alpha King's command. She crossed the herb garden, climbed a low stone wall, and disappeared between the trees before anyone called her name. She had heard stories about Alpha King Valdemar since childhood. Everyone had. A king who could silence a council chamber simply by entering it. A warrior whose black armor still carried the scratches of battles no court musician dared romanticize. A ruler whose crimson cloak and royal sword were recognized from one end of the kingdom to the other. Avellini had never imagined he would have any reason to know she existed. Now his seal was attached to an order describing the mark hidden against her skin. She ran until her lungs burned, following an old merchant road south, but near midnight she saw torchlight ahead. A checkpoint. Royal soldiers were inspecting wagons one by one. Avellini stopped behind a stone barn, heart-pounding. She couldn't return to the village. She couldn't pass the soldiers on foot. Then she saw the carriage. It waited beyond the barn, enormous and black, its polished doors marked with a silver royal crest. 2 horses stood harnessed at the front while the driver spoke with a guard several yards away. Avellini stared at the crest. No soldier would search the crown's own carriage. It was reckless. It was also her only chance. She crossed the yard quickly, opened the rear door, and climbed inside. The interior was dark and unexpectedly warm. Heavy curtains covered the windows, and the carriage smelled faintly of cedar and leather. Avellini crouched behind the rear bench as footsteps approached. The door opened. Someone entered. She held her breath, expecting discovery, but the person settled onto the opposite seat without speaking. Moments later, the carriage began moving. Avellini remained hidden until exhaustion overcame fear. She couldn't remember falling asleep. When she opened her eyes, pale morning light slipped through the curtains and wheels hummed beneath her. She slowly raised her head above the seat. A man sat opposite her. He was enormous, broad-shouldered, and perfectly still, with long black hair falling around a sharply handsome face. Black royal armor covered his body, polished metal catching the thin light, old scratches visible across its surface. Heavy fur rested over his shoulders. A rich crimson cloak spilled beside him, pooling near the sword at his hip. Avellini stopped breathing. She knew that sword. She knew that armor. She knew the face stamped onto every royal coin she had ever touched. The man's dark eyes lifted to hers. Alpha King Valdemar regarded the terrified Omega hiding in his carriage with an expression she could not read. "You've been asleep for 3 hours," he said quietly. Avellini's hand closed around the door handle. She had spent the entire night running from the Alpha King. Somehow, she had climbed into his carriage. Avellini pulled the carriage handle, but Valdemar's hand closed over the latch before the door could open. "Do not," he said. She recoiled as though the 2 words confirmed everything she feared. "Let me out. We are moving too quickly." "Then stop the carriage." Valdemar studied her. She was pale from exhaustion, her long brown blonde hair tangled from a night spent running, yet there was something harder than fear in her eyes. Defiance. "Why were you hiding in my carriage?" he asked. "I did not know it was yours. The royal crest is painted on both doors. That was why I chose it." For the first time, his expression shifted. "You hid in a royal carriage because it was royal? I thought no one would search it." Valdemar leaned back. "Who is searching for you?" Avellini said nothing. The carriage continued along the forest road, putting another mile between her and everything familiar. She looked again at the sword beside his crimson cloak. Valdemar noticed. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his hand away from the weapon. "I asked who you were running from." Avellini swallowed. "You." Silence filled the carriage. Valdemar's gaze sharpened. "Me? Your riders came to my village. My riders travel through many villages. They had a warrant." Something changed behind his eyes. "What warrant?" Avellini almost laughed, but there was no humor in her. "You expect me to believe you do not know? I expect you to tell me what you saw." Royal bond examination. Valdemar became completely still. Avellini continued before fear could silence her. "They were inspecting Omegas. They were looking for someone with a particular mark." His gaze dropped briefly toward the collar of her dress, and Avellini immediately covered the fabric beneath her collarbone. The movement was small. It told him too much. She reached for the door again. Valdemar blocked it without touching her. "Stop the carriage," he called. The carriage slowed until the wheels became silent. Avellini stared at him, surprised. "You wanted it stopped." He opened the door. Morning light spilled across the black armor at his shoulders. Beyond him stretched miles of unfamiliar forest. No soldiers stood waiting. No chains. No hidden escorts surrounding the road. She could leave. Avellini moved toward the doorway, then hesitated. She had no cloak, almost no money, and no idea where she was. Valdemar understood the calculation crossing her face. "If I wanted you captured," he said, "you would not need to guess." The words should have frightened her. Instead, their calm certainty unsettled her more. "Then why are you keeping me here?" "Because someone entered a village carrying an order in my name that I did not issue." Avellini stared at him. "That is impossible." "No, it is treason." Her certainty wavered for the first time. She remembered the parchment in Bridget's hands. The heavy seal pressed into dark wax. The royal insignia had been unmistakable. "It had your seal." "Then I need to know exactly what you saw." "And if I tell you?" "I find whoever used it." Avellini searched his face for the cruelty she had expected to find there. She found impatience, authority, and something colder directed not at her, but at the idea that someone had spoken with his voice without permission. Still, Bridget's warning remained louder than everything else. "Do not let them take you to the capital." "I am leaving." Valdemar stepped aside. Avellini put one foot onto the carriage step. The forest was silent around them. She could disappear between those trees, but she had no idea whether the next checkpoint was 1 mile away or 20. Then Valdemar spoke. "If the people searching for you believe they are acting under my authority, walking alone will not make you safer." She hated that he was right. Slowly, Avellini stepped back inside. It was her decision, but it did not feel like freedom. Valdemar closed the door and called for the driver to continue. "Until I know who issued that warrant, you remain with the royal convoy as a protected witness." Her stomach tightened at one word. Remain. To him, perhaps it meant protection. To Avellini, it sounded dangerously close to imprisonment. "I never agreed to belong to your convoy." His eyes met hers. "You do not belong to anyone." The answer caught her off guard. Valdemar waited a moment before asking, "Describe the seal." Avellini pictured the parchment again. A crowned wolf facing left. A ring of thorns around the edge. Dark red wax. The color drained subtly from Valdemar's face. His gaze moved toward the curtained window, as though the road ahead had suddenly become far more dangerous than the frightened Omega sitting across from him. "What?" Avellini asked. He did not answer immediately. When he finally looked back at her, the suspicion in his eyes was no longer directed at her. "That seal has not been used by the crown in 19 years. 19 years. The number followed Avellini long after the carriage began moving again. That is my age, she said. Valdemar's gaze settled on her. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Avellini wished she had kept the thought to herself. Coincidence, she added quickly. Perhaps. He did not sound convinced. Near midday, the royal convoy stopped at a roadside lodge used by crown messengers. Valdemar disappeared inside with 2 officers, while Avellini remained near the carriage under the watch of guards who had been specifically ordered not to approach her unless she asked for something. It should have reassured her. Instead, every royal crest she saw reminded her that she was surrounded by the same authority she had spent the previous night escaping. Inside the lodge, Valdemar examined another warrant confiscated 3 days earlier from a northern checkpoint. The seal looked authentic, but the wax told a different story. Modern royal documents used a brighter crimson mixture. This wax was darker, almost brown at its edges, made from an older formula abandoned years ago. Someone had not merely copied his authority. Someone had resurrected an old version of it. When Valdemar returned, he offered Avellini the parchment. Is this what you saw? She recognized the words immediately. Royal bond examination. Her stomach tightened. Yes, exactly. Almost. She pointed toward the lower section. The one in my village described the mark. Valdemar folded the warrant. This one does not. What does that mean? It means the orders are not identical. You still expect me to trust you? No. His answer surprised her. Trust should have evidence. Before she could respond, shouting rose from the road. 3 mounted men had arrived at the lodge carrying papers authorizing them to collect a fugitive Omega. Avellini saw the royal seal from several yards away and instinctively stepped backward. Valdemar moved between her and the newcomers. By whose command? He asked. The lead rider looked confused. The crown, Your Majesty. Valdemar held out his hand. The man surrendered the document. Valdemar read it once. His expression hardened. I gave no such command. Avellini stared at the riders. They looked as shocked as she felt. Whoever had sent them expected the king's own name to be enough. Valdemar ordered the men detained for questioning, but forbade punishment until it was clear whether they had knowingly served a false order. Then he turned toward Avellini. Now do you believe there is another possibility? She wanted to say no. Instead, she whispered, I believe someone wants me found. That distinction mattered. Valdemar seemed to understand. One frightened horse suddenly pulled against its reins nearby. Avellini stepped aside too quickly and caught her dress against the carriage latch. The fabric at her shoulder tore several inches. She immediately covered the exposed skin, but not before Valdemar saw the edge of the pale mark beneath her collarbone. He stopped. Something changed in him so suddenly that Avellini felt it before she understood it. His breathing slowed. His fingers curled at his sides. Behind his controlled expression came something ancient and instinctive, a recognition that seemed to strike deeper than thought. Avellini backed away. Valdemar immediately did the opposite. He stepped back from her. Then another step. He turned his face aside as if deliberately giving her room. Cover it, he said, his voice rougher than before. Avellini pulled the torn fabric together. Why? He removed the heavy fur from his shoulders and placed it across the carriage seat rather than approaching her with it. Use that. She hesitated, then took it herself and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fur nearly swallowed her. You know what the mark means. I know I have seen that symbol. Where? Valdemar looked toward the distant road leading to the capital. In the oldest section of the royal archive. Avellini's fear returned, but it had changed shape. Then the warrant was telling the truth. About the symbol, perhaps. Not about my order. She studied him. This was the moment she had feared since childhood without knowing why. The Alpha King had seen what Brigid told her to hide. Yet he had not seized her. He had not touched the mark. He had not even moved closer. He had stepped away. That frightened her certainty more than cruelty would have. Valdemar picked up the forged warrant again. We return to the capital before whoever issued these orders realizes you are with me. You expect me to walk willingly into the place I was warned never to go? His eyes sharpened. Who warned you? Avellini went silent. She had already revealed too much. Valdemar did not press her. He looked once more at the place beneath the fur where her mark was hidden. "I will not ask you to trust me yet," he said. "But I need to understand why someone is searching for you with a dead royal seal." Avellini felt the carriage beneath her hand, the same carriage she had chosen because she thought it could carry her beyond the king's reach. Now it was taking her toward his palace. Valdemar opened the door for her but did not command her inside. "You said you have seen my mark before," she said. "Yes." "Then tell me where." His expression became unreadable. "Carved above a sealed door in the royal archive," he said. "A door that has not been opened in 19 years. By the time the palace gates opened, half the royal court already knew an unknown Omega had arrived in the king's private carriage." Avellini felt the whispers before she heard them. Servants paused beneath stone archways. Guards looked away too quickly. Noblewomen gathered along the upper gallery as Valdemar crossed the courtyard in black armor, his crimson cloak trailing behind him, while Avellini followed several steps away wrapped in the fur he had given her. She hated how the scene must look. She had entered the carriage as a fugitive. The palace saw a woman brought home by a king. Valdemar seemed to notice the attention too. "Stay close," he said quietly. Avellini stopped. "I thought I did not belong to anyone." He turned. "You do not. Then do not speak to me as though I do." Something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps. Before he could answer, an older man in dark formal robes approached from the great hall. Silver threaded his hair, and a chain bearing the Chancellor's insignia rested across his chest. He bowed. "Your Majesty, we were not expecting your return." "Clearly," Valdemar said. "Chancellor Lycerus, this is Avellini." Lycerus looked at her, and for one terrible second, his expression emptied. Not surprised at seeing a stranger. Recognition. It vanished so quickly she wondered whether fear had invented it. "The young woman from your carriage," Lycerus said. Avellini's pulse tightened. "How do you know where I was found?" Valdemar looked at him as well. Lycerus smiled politely. "News travels quickly inside palace walls." "We arrived less than 5 minutes ago," Valdemar said. Silence stretched between the two men. Lycerus recovered first. "Then your escort was efficient." Valdemar gave no answer. He ordered rooms prepared for Avellini and announced that no one was permitted to question her without his approval. To him, it was protection. To everyone listening, it sounded like possession. By evening, the rumor had grown teeth. Avellini heard servants whisper that she had hidden in the king's carriage deliberately. Another claimed she had crossed 3 provinces trying to reach him. Someone else called her an ambitious Omega hoping to become Luna. Each version erased the terrified woman who had climbed into that carriage only because she believed it was the one place royal soldiers would not search. The next morning, Lycerus summoned an emergency session of the Royal Council. Valdemar brought Avellini with him. The council chamber was colder than any room she had entered before, lined with carved wolves and generations of royal banners. Valdemar took his place before the throne while Avellini stood alone beneath dozens of judging eyes. "This woman entered the king's private carriage without authorization," one councilman said. "While royal documents have reportedly disappeared from northern routes." "She is not accused of stealing anything," Valdemar replied. "Not yet," Lycerus said softly. Avellini looked at him. His eyes dropped briefly toward the fur covering her shoulder. She understood. He was looking for the mark. "We have received reports," Lycerus continued, "that certain Omegas are concealing identifying signs relevant to crown security." Valdemar's expression hardened. "What signs?" Lycerus turned toward Avellini. "Perhaps she should show us." A murmur spread through the chamber. Avellini clutched the fur closed. Valdemar stepped down from the throne platform. "No." The single word silenced the room. "Your Majesty," Lycerus said, "if she has nothing to hide, her body is not evidence for this council to inspect." Avellini looked at Valdemar. For the first time since entering the palace, something inside her loosened. He could have ordered her to reveal the mark. Instead, he had placed his authority between her and the people demanding it. Lycerus watched them both, calculating. "Then what is she?" he asked. "A protected witness," Valdemar said. The words echoed through the chamber. "Protected." Yet Avellini remembered the locked palace gates, the guards outside her rooms, and his earlier command that she remain with the convoy. Protection still felt dangerously similar to a cage. Lucerus inclined his head. "As you wish." He turned away, then stopped beside Avellini. His voice lowered, but the chamber had become so silent that everyone heard him. It is remarkable how faithfully old mistakes return. Avellini's skin went cold. Valdemar rose. "Explain yourself." Lucerus looked directly at the hidden place beneath her collarbone. "Some marks, your majesty, should have died with the child who carried them." Lucerus's words followed Avellini all the way back to her rooms. Some marks should have died with the child who carried them. He had not spoken as a scholar recalling an old legend. He had looked directly at the place beneath her collarbone. He knew. Avellini waited until the guards outside changed shifts, then crossed the room to the window. 2 stories below, a narrow garden wall ran beneath the eastern wing. She had escaped through tighter places before. A quiet knock stopped her. Valdemar entered alone. He had removed his armor, but the royal sword remained at his side. "Lucerus knew your mark," he said. "I noticed. I am having his records examined." "And what will you tell me when you find something?" Avellini asked. "Whatever the evidence proves." "That is not what I asked." Valdemar went still. Avellini faced him. "You recognized the symbol before we reached the palace. You knew there was a sealed archive door. You brought me here, and now your chancellor speaks as though he knows something about my birth. Yet every time I ask for the truth, you give me another reason to wait. Because I do not have the truth yet. Then stop deciding what I am allowed to know." The accusation landed harder than she expected. Valdemar's expression changed, but he did not defend himself. "You are right." Avellini almost wished he had argued. Anger was easier to hold when the other person refused to understand it. "I am leaving. The palace is not safe outside these rooms." "That sounds very much like another reason I am not allowed to leave." Valdemar looked toward the window and understood immediately what she had planned. For several seconds, neither moved. Then he walked to the door. Avellini expected him to call the guards. Instead, he opened it. "Stand down," he ordered. The 2 guards outside looked confused. "Your Majesty?" "Avellini is free to leave the palace." She stared at him. "Just like that. If I close the gates because I believe danger waits outside them, the result is still a locked gate." His voice lowered. "I will not make your fear of me reasonable." Something painful shifted inside her. This was not what she had expected from the man whose seal had driven her from home. Valdemar stepped aside. "I can offer protection. I cannot make you accept it." Avellini walked past him before uncertainty could change her mind. No one stopped her. She crossed the great hall, descended the palace steps, and passed through gates that remained open. Only when the palace stood several blocks behind her did she realize Valdemar had kept his word. He had not followed. Avellini spent the afternoon moving through crowded market streets, uncertain where she could go until she heard someone call her name. Bridget stood beneath the awning of a cloth merchant, exhausted and breathless from travel. Avellini rushed to her. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you." Bridget gripped her hands. "The riders returned after you disappeared. Then word reached us that you were with the king. Lucerus knows about my mark." The color left Bridget's face. That reaction was answer enough. "You know something too." "Not enough." "Then tell me what you do know." Bridget glanced around before leading her into a quiet rented room above the shop. From beneath her cloak, she removed a folded piece of yellowed parchment. "Your mother gave me this before she died. She made me promise I would never show it unless the crown started searching for you." Avellini unfolded it carefully. It was part of an old royal birth registry. The page had been torn vertically, leaving several entries incomplete. "Your mother served as a healer near the royal court," Bridget said. "After you were born, she became terrified. She took you away and never returned." "Why?" "She would never tell me everything. Only that the palace must believe you were gone." Avellini examined the surviving entries. Each birth had a number, date, family name, and status. One line ended abruptly at the torn edge. The next began with another child. Avellini frowned. "The numbers." Bridget nodded. Entry 412 appeared above the tear. Entry 414 appeared below it. 413 was missing. Avellini looked at the date beside the missing space. Her hands began to tremble. No. She checked it again. Same month. Same day. Same year. 19 years ago. Her birthday. Bridget touched her shoulder gently. I think someone removed you from this record. Avellini stared at the empty place where a name should have been. She had run from the Alpha King because she feared being taken into his world. Now she understood something far worse. Long before she ever entered his carriage, someone inside that world had already known exactly who she was. The missing number in the registry was the first proof Avellini had ever seen that her life had been deliberately erased. She read the surviving lines again while Bridget watched in silence, but the torn parchment could not tell them who had removed the entry or what had originally been written there. The other half must exist somewhere, Avellini said. If it survived, Bridget replied. Avellini folded the page carefully. The Royal Archive. Bridget caught her wrist. You just escaped the palace. I left because I would not remain there without answers. That is different from refusing to find them. By dusk, they had returned to the outer palace grounds, but Avellini stopped before the gates. Valdemar was waiting beneath the stone archway. No guards surrounded him. He had apparently guessed she would return. His eyes moved from Avellini to Bridget, then to the folded parchment in Avellini's hand. You found something. Avellini held it out. Valdemar examined the numbering, and his expression darkened when he saw the missing entry. Where did this come from? My mother gave it to Bridget. Your mother had access to royal records? Bridget answered quietly. She served as a healer near the court before Avellini was born. Valdemar looked at Avellini. Then we opened the archive. There was no order for her to surrender the parchment. No demand that she stay behind. He simply turned toward the palace, leaving the choice to follow with her. This time, Avellini did. The oldest archive occupied a stone chamber beneath the eastern wing. Valdemar brought only the royal archivist and 2 trusted officers. The sealed door Avellini had heard about stood at the end of the corridor. Above it was the same crescent symbol hidden beneath her dress, surrounded by a carved crown. Her breath caught. Valdemar noticed, but said nothing. The archivist unlocked the chamber. Inside, shelves held decades of birth registers, council orders, and sealed correspondence. They found the official volume from 19 years earlier within minutes. Entry 412. Then 414. No torn edge. No blank line. The entire page had been replaced. Look at the stitching, Bridget whispered. The thread binding that page was darker than the rest. Valdemar turned to the archivist. Who could have replaced a page? At that time? The royal registrar, the senior council secretary, or someone authorized by either office. Valdemar requested the access ledger from that year. The archivist hesitated before placing another book on the table. Avellini watched Valdemar scan the names. His fingers stopped. 19 years earlier, the senior council secretary's office had been granted access 3 times during the month of Avellini's birth. The secretary assigned to that office had been Lucerus. It was not proof that he had altered anything, but it was the first line connecting him to the missing record. Valdemar looked toward Avellini. We need the original registry page. And the seal records, she said. Something almost like approval passed through his expression. Yes. For the first time, they were not king and fugitive. They were 2 people following different trails toward the same hidden truth. Then the archive doors opened behind them. A royal officer entered carrying a document. Your Majesty, the council has issued an emergency petition. Valdemar took it. His jaw tightened. What happened? Avellini asked. He handed her the page. The accusation was written plainly. Avellini was charged with entering restricted royal property, removing crown documents, and attempting to fabricate a blood claim using altered records. That was fast, Bridget whispered. Avellini understood why. Whoever had changed the registry knew they were getting close. Valdemar looked toward the officers. No one touches her. Your Majesty, the archivist said carefully, the petition invokes council law. Refusing it publicly could be interpreted as interference. Valdemar faced Avellini. His choice was suddenly larger than protecting one frightened Omega. If he shielded her now, the council could accuse him of placing personal interest above royal law. Avellini waited for hesitation. It never came. Then they may interpret it however they wish. He stepped beside her. She remains free until evidence proves otherwise. The following morning, the council chamber was filled before they arrived. Lucerys stood near the central table, composed as ever. Avellini entered beside Brigid. Valdemar walked behind them, his black armor and crimson cloak turning every whisper into silence. Lucerys presented the accusation calmly. Then he ordered the official birth registry brought forward. This woman claims her identity was removed from royal history, he said. Fortunately, history does not depend upon memory. The registrar opened the volume. Avellini's fingers tightened around her mother's torn copy. Lucerys looked directly at her. Read the relevant record. The registrar swallowed. 19 years ago, a female Omega infant bearing the moon crown mark was registered under royal observation. Avellini stopped breathing. Valdemar's gaze snapped toward the book. The registrar continued. The child survived less than 1 day. Brigid whispered Avellini's name. The final words fell into the chamber like a door closing. The official record states that the marked infant died 19 years ago. The court had a record of Avellini's death, but Avellini was standing alive beneath its chandeliers. No one spoke. The registrar stared at the page as though the ink itself had betrayed him. Avellini could hear her own breathing, too fast and too shallow, while Lucerys remained perfectly composed. Then the matter is settled, he said. Whatever this woman believes about herself, she cannot be the infant described in that record. Brigid stepped forward. She is. Lucerys turned to her. And you can prove that? Her mother brought her to me after leaving the royal court. She told me the palace must believe the child was gone. A murmur moved through the chamber. So her mother fled with a child under royal observation, Lucerys said. That sounds less like innocence and more like betrayal. Avellini felt the trap closing. Every truth could be reshaped into another accusation. Her mother had hidden her, therefore her mother was guilty. Avellini had survived, therefore Avellini was lying. The record had been altered, therefore she must have altered it. She looked toward Valdemar. He stood beside the throne, silent, his expression unreadable. For one painful moment, the silence felt like abandonment. Then Valdemar reached for the sword at his side. The entire chamber went still. He unfastened the belt and placed the sheathed weapon across the steps below the throne. Then he removed his crimson cloak and descended until he stood on the same floor as Avellini. No throne between them. No sword at his hip. Avellini, he said. Look at me. She did. The council can continue this hearing. Or you can leave. Lucerys's composure finally cracked. Your Majesty, she is under formal accusation. An accusation is not ownership. Valdemar never looked away from Avellini. The gates are open. No guard will stop you. If you remain, it will be because you choose to. Avellini stared at him. Days ago, she had run from his seal. Yesterday, she had walked out of his palace because she believed staying meant surrender. Now, every instinct told her to escape again. But running would leave Lucerys with the official record, the missing page, and the authority to define who she had been. Avellini slowly turned toward the council. I am staying. Valdemar gave a single nod and stepped back. He did not stand in front of her this time. He stood beside her. Lucerys folded his hands. Then perhaps she will explain why she possesses stolen royal records. Avellini removed her mother's torn parchment. This was outside the palace for 19 years. If I fabricated it, then I apparently began planning this crime before I could walk. A few council members exchanged uneasy looks. She placed the parchment beside the official volume. The page in your book was replaced. The binding proves that. My copy proves an entry once existed between 412 and 414. Instead of asking why I survived, perhaps we should ask who needed the kingdom to believe I died. Lucerys's expression hardened. Speculation. Then let us stop speculating. Avellini looked at Valdemar. The warrants. He understood immediately. They carry an obsolete seal, he told the council. Someone has been issuing orders under royal authority without my consent. That has no connection to this hearing, Lucerys said too quickly. Avellini caught it. So did Valdemar. It has every connection, she said. The warrants describe my mark. Whoever issued them knew what they were searching for. Whoever altered that registry knew the same thing 19 years ago. Lucerys rose. You are accusing an office of the crown based on coincidence. No, Avellini said. I am asking to see who had access. Valdemar ordered the archive ledger brought forward. The registrar opened it to the month of Avellini's birth. Lucerys's former office appeared 3 times. The room changed. No one whispered now. Lucerys looked around the chamber and realized suspicion had finally moved away from Avellini. Old access records prove nothing, he said. Then you should have no objection to opening the Chancellor's archive, Avellini replied. Lucerys's eyes snapped toward her. There it was. Not annoyance. Fear. He turned to Valdemar. Your Majesty, those records contain confidential matters concerning the security of the kingdom. Valdemar studied him. So does falsifying my seal. You cannot open that archive because of an Omega's accusation. Avellini felt the old instinct rising again, the desire to shrink beneath the weight of men who believed rank made their voices more truthful than hers. This time she did not move. Then do not open it because of me, she said. Open it because your king did not issue those warrants. Valdemar's gaze remained on Lucerys. Open the Chancellor's archive. Lucerys went pale. That reaction became the answer before any document was found. Within the hour, royal officers returned carrying a locked wooden case. Inside lay correspondence ledgers, obsolete administrative seals, and beneath them, wrapped in faded cloth, a metal seal mold. Valdemar lifted it carefully. A crowned wolf faced left. Around it ran a ring of thorns. The same image Avellini had described in his carriage. Beside the mold rested a sealed envelope yellowed with age. Brigid covered her mouth when she saw the handwriting. Avellini, she whispered. That is your mother's hand. Avellini stepped closer. Her name was written across the front. Beneath it were 5 words that made the entire chamber disappear around her. For my daughter, if she lives. Avellini broke the seal with hands that would not stop trembling. The letter inside was written in faded ink, but the first words were unmistakable. My dearest Avellini, if you are reading this, then they failed to erase you completely. Avellini pressed her lips together as Brigid moved closer. Valdemar remained several feet away, giving her the choice to read privately, but Avellini lifted her head. Read it aloud. The royal registrar accepted the letter only after she offered it. Avellini wanted every person who had watched Lucerys question her existence to hear what her mother had left behind. The letter described the night of Avellini's birth. Her mother had served among the healers attached to the royal household. When the mooncrown mark appeared beneath her newborn daughter's collarbone, senior members of the council ordered the child registered under royal observation. The mark was ancient, older than the current laws governing mate bonds. It identified a rare crown bond, a connection said to appear between a future ruler and the person capable of becoming that ruler's true mate. At the time, Valdemar had still been a young prince. He had never seen the infant. He had never known her name. But others understood what her existence might someday mean. A true crown mate could weaken the council's influence over a future king by giving the throne a bond outside their control. Avellini's mother overheard officials discussing how the child should be raised, watched, and eventually presented to the prince when politically useful. She refused to let her daughter become an instrument of the crown. She took Avellini and fled. The registrar's voice faltered at the final section. Avellini looked toward Lucerys. He no longer appeared calm. Her mother's letter named the young council secretary who discovered their escape. Lucerys. He had offered her mother a choice. Return the child, or allow the royal record to declare the infant dead so no rival faction would search for her. Avellini's mother chose disappearance. What she had not known was that Lucerys intended to preserve the secret for himself. You erased her, Valdemar said. Lucerys lifted his chin. I protected the stability of the crown. For 19 years? You were a prince surrounded by factions. Later you became a king surrounded by the same factions. The existence of a crown mate would have changed every alliance in this kingdom. Valdemar's voice became dangerously quiet. So you decided I should never know. Lucerys looked at Avellini. Her mother made the first decision. My mother decided I should be free, Avellini said. You decided the truth belonged to you. Lucerys's expression tightened. The old seal mold on the table now connected the past to the warrants circulating through the border packs. When rumors surfaced that the supposedly dead child might have survived, Lucerys had resurrected an obsolete royal seal and created the royal bond examination. He had never intended to collect random omegas. The broad search was camouflage. He needed one woman. One mark. Avellini. Suddenly every piece of her fear changed meaning. The riders had not come because Valdemar wanted her. They had come because Lucerys was terrified Valdemar might find her first. The seal that made her run had belonged to the crown once, but not to the king sitting on the throne now. The carriage she had believed carried her into captivity had accidentally carried her beyond Lucerys's control. Even Valdemar's strange reaction when he saw her mark made sense now. His wolf had recognized something his mind had never been allowed to know. Lucerys looked toward the council. You are allowing an ancient superstition to overturn 19 years of order. No, Avellini said. Your own records are doing that. Valdemar ordered Lucerys removed from authority pending formal judgment. There was no spectacle, no cruelty, only the quiet removal of the chancellor's insignia and the sealing of his office. When the chamber finally emptied, Avellini remained beside the table with her mother's letter. She should have felt victorious. Instead, grief settled over her. Her entire life had been shaped by decisions made before she could speak. Her mother had hidden her. Lucerys had erased her. The council had turned her mark into politics. Fate itself had apparently connected her to a man she had never chosen. Valdemar approached, then stopped several feet away. There is one matter the council will raise tomorrow. Avellini already knew. The crown bond. Yes. She looked at him. Does it mean I am your mate? Valdemar was silent before answering. It means an ancient mark says there is a bond between us. That was not my question. His expression softened with something that looked almost like sadness. No mark can answer your question for you. Avellini stared at him. The court will expect you to claim me. Then the court will be disappointed. And if the law says otherwise? Then I will change the law. She had spent days expecting the most powerful man in the kingdom to take away her choices. Instead, every time he truly had the power to do so, he stepped back. Valdemar reached into his coat and placed a small iron key on the table. Your carriage is waiting in the eastern courtyard. Avellini recognized the key before touching it. The same carriage? The same one. Why? Because you entered it when you were trying to escape me. His eyes held hers. You should know you can use it to leave me too. Avellini could not speak. If freedom is what you want, no gate in my kingdom will close against you. He turned and walked away without asking whether she would stay. Avellini stood alone with her mother's letter in one hand and the carriage key in the other, realizing the final choice in a life shaped by everyone else's decisions had finally become hers. Avellini left the palace before sunrise, and for the first time in her life, no one tried to stop her. The black royal carriage waited in the eastern courtyard exactly as Valdemar had promised. No guards surrounded it. No command had been hidden inside his gift. Bridget stood beside Avellini as she climbed in, carrying only her mother's letter and the torn registry page. When the carriage passed beneath the palace gates, Avellini looked back once. Valdemar was standing high on the eastern balcony, black against the pale stone. He did not raise a hand. He did not call her name. He simply watched the carriage disappear. That silence stayed with her. 3 days later, the royal council formally stripped Lucerys of office while investigators reviewed the altered registry, forged warrants, and unauthorized use of the obsolete seal. Every royal bond examination order was cancelled. Border packs were instructed that no Omega who had fled because of those warrants would face punishment for leaving. Valdemar went further. Before the assembled council, he introduced a new royal decree declaring that no maid examination could be compelled without consent, and no council office could issue orders concerning mate status without direct authorization from the crown. Some protested that ancient bonds existed above individual preference. Valdemar's answer was simple. Destiny may reveal a bond. It does not own the people within it. Avellini heard those words from Bridget in a small inn nearly 40 miles from the capital. She sat beside the window for a long time afterward, turning the carriage key between her fingers. She had expected freedom to feel like distance. Instead, she discovered that freedom was something quieter. It was knowing she could return without being trapped. It was knowing she could stay away without being hunted. It was finally understanding the difference between being wanted and being possessed. The following morning, Avellini asked the driver to turn the carriage around. When the palace appeared beyond the hills, she felt fear again, but it was no longer the fear that had sent her running through the forest. This fear belonged to choice. The gates opened as the carriage approached. No messenger had announced her return. No royal escort had gone searching. Yet by the time the carriage stopped in the same eastern courtyard, Valdemar was descending the palace steps. He wore black royal armor and the heavy fur over his shoulders, but his sword remained sheathed at his side. His crimson cloak moved behind him as he stopped several feet from the carriage. He did not open the door. Avellini smiled faintly when she understood why. Even now, he was waiting for her to decide. She opened it herself. Valdemar's expression changed when she stepped down in her simple sage dress, her brown blonde hair loose over her shoulders. "You came back," he said. "I did." "Why?" There were dozens of answers she could have given. The mark. The bond. Her restored place in the royal records. None of them were the truth that mattered. "Because this time no one made me." Valdemar lowered his head for a moment, and when he looked at her again, the powerful Alpha King seemed almost uncertain. Avellini had never imagined uncertainty could make him appear more trustworthy. "The council restored your birth record this morning," he said. "Your name is yours again. And the title they think belongs with it? Nothing belongs to you unless you accept it." Avellini stepped closer. "Including you?" A quiet warmth entered his expression. "Especially me." Days later, the court gathered again. The same chamber that had once questioned whether Avellini had any right to exist now heard her name entered publicly into the royal record. Valdemar did not announce her as his Luna. He did not invoke the crown bond. Instead, before the same people who had expected a king to claim what destiny had given him, he asked Avellini whether she wished to stand beside him. She looked around the chamber. Bridget was there. The altered registry lay open beside her mother's letter. Valdemar's sword rested untouched near the throne. Every object that had once represented fear now carried a different meaning. Avellini looked back at the man she had once crossed miles to escape. "Yes," she said. It was only one word, but it belonged entirely to her. Valdemar offered his hand. She chose to take it. No ancient mark made that decision. No council ordered it. No king demanded it. And when Avellini later saw the black carriage waiting beyond the palace steps, she remembered the frightened Omega who had climbed inside believing it was the safest place to hide from the Alpha King. She had been wrong about whose carriage it was. She had been wrong about who was hunting her. But she had not been wrong to run when she believed her freedom was in danger. That journey had taught both of them something more important than fate. Love meant nothing without choice. The first time that Carriage carried Avellini toward Valdemar, she had been trying desperately to escape him. The second time, it carried her back because she was finally free to choose him.